Okay, so now we're going to talk about some different employment laws. A lot of these are federal laws, but then there's also state laws that can maybe, adjust or support the laws in different ways. And the reality is we need to kind of be familiar with these laws. And so one thing that we might do in class is just see what laws are specific to Texas as far as this goes. In 1964, they did the Civil Rights Act, and basically this says that they can't discriminate you based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Now, one of the problems with this is it applies to employers with 15 or more employees, and there are several small dental offices that, might have 8 employees or something to that effect. So they would not be held accountable for this law, and you would not be able to file a discrimination suit against them. This not only applies to getting hired, but also, if you feel like you're fired because of one of these things. So say you felt like it had something to do with your race or something like that. Or your compensation. You shouldn't be being paid less because you have a certain race, and your salary, promotions, fringe benefits, retirement. Okay, this is a big one because so many of us are female in our profession. Though there are getting more and more males, a lot of hygienists are women. So, just like they couldn't ask questions whether you're pregnant or whether you're planning on being pregnant soon, they can't refuse to hire you because of that. And they can't treat somebody with pregnancy-related conditions differently. They have to treat temporarily disabled employees the same. So if you cannot work because you have preeclampsia or something to that effect, you should be able to get that time off like others. You can't have a time-related policy prohibiting you to return for work. You must have health insurance for pregnancy costs, and I think this one's silly too. Can you imagine limiting having pregnancy benefits because you're married or not? But here again, this is one that happened to somebody at some point. So they had to create this in law so that it could not keep continuing. We have the Equal Pay Act of 1963, which says that women and men should be paid the same amount, right? And we know that continues to be a problem this day. I don't have the statistics offhand, but we do know that women in general are paid less than men, and colored women are even paid less than that. So it's definitely a problem. There's the Age Discrimination Act of 1967, and it prohibits discrimination based on age for those that are 40 plus. That seems so young to me, 40. I'm like, oh, I'm part of that, ouch. But you think about how much our lifespan has increased since 1967. I don't know how much, but I'm assuming 15, 20 years perhaps. And they're basically saying you can't discriminate because somebody's older. This again has that limitation of it's somebody that has to have more than 20 employees. And then there's the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. It prohibits discrimination of qualified individuals with a disability. So I actually know that at TWU, they have a hygiene student right now that is in a wheelchair. Now, they've had to make accommodations for her. So, for example, at their school, they have polishers that you had to use a foot pedal to push. Well, because she doesn't have feeling in her feet, they were able to get one of the ones that we have that you just push on the tooth to start it, right? They had to make accommodations for her as far as her workspace and made sure that her wheelchair was able to get in. I also know a hygienist who's deaf. And, is she able to do the things that are qualified, to use that skill? Yes. She reads lips really well. But I'm assuming that there are some additional things that she needs in her office in order to do her job well. So this one with disabilities, what they say is, you can't discriminate based on somebody, and you have to provide the things that they might need in order to do their job well. So if somebody's hard of hearing, you might need to, have some kind of something to help them hear. My husband, he works in business, and he said that there was a guy that just, they couldn't get work because his vision had gotten so bad because of some disease that he'd had. And they have a program at his work where they try to help people with disabilities. And so he was kind of on this, it's almost like an internship. And what they did, this is Fidelity Investments, is they got him a screen that allowed it to get super big or something to that effect. And, they made all these accommodations in order for him to be able to work. And he was so grateful that this program happened, and my husband was part of getting him hired permanently, because for so much time he'd been, sent away because of his disability. So, certainly we have to put our head in the space of somebody with a disability and know that they also need to, be employed as well. Now, when you remember, if you have some kind of a disability, the employer cannot ask you about the nature, severity of a disability, but they can tell you about the job requirements and ask you if you are able to do that. And once again, this one's for employers with 15 plus employees, so a lot of dental offices don't even have to follow that. Uniform Service Employment and Reemployment Act of 1994. So if somebody is hired and then they're called away to duty, you're required to give them a job when they come back from the line of duty. Now we're going to talk a little bit about state laws. So sometimes what they will do is they can't necessarily change the federal laws, but they could make it more specific, or define it or something to that effect. So they might say, instead of you having to follow this law if you have 15 employees, they could say you have to follow this if you have at least 8 employees. So that could be something that the state could do. They can extend the scope of practice. So instead of not discriminating against males and females, it could be other sexual orientations or something to that effect. And they can extend what things that you might be required to help somebody with a disability. So state laws don't necessarily change them. But they can, make them tighter. They can't probably make them looser, but they could tighten them up in a way. So when you think about enforcing these discrimination laws, I like this graphic that I found. People actually fill out a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it enforces these federal laws. They have 15 districts without the country, and they have specific guidelines for filling out a complaint, and the employer cannot retaliate. But if you look over here, as far as the complaint allegations, 76,000 of them, this was in 2016, were because they were retaliated for maybe speaking up about something or complaining about something that they should be following. So the majority of them are actually because of retaliation. Almost 5,000 of them were due to age, 4,000 due to physical disabilities, and then we have almost 4,000 for race and 4,000 for that female discrimination that we see a lot of times. Here's another big one for women, because a lot of times we end up being the caretakers for the family. So the great thing about this, it's actually for men and women, but what it involves is allowing people to have time off if they have family situations. So some of those things might be the birth of a baby or even adopting a baby. It could be somebody that has an immediate family member with a serious health condition. I know people who have had to take leave because they have children who are like suicidal or like seriously depressed type thing, or dealing with an eating disorder or something to that effect. It could also be for somebody who has to take care of an elderly parent, or if they have somebody called away to serve in the armed forces and you have to step back to fill in that role. So the other thing about this is it doesn't have to be all at once. It could be intermittent, meaning you start and then things kind of get better, so you take a break, so you go back to work, and then things get worse again. So that is always an option as well. And some states extend this to include things like helping somebody that is being abused, or dealing with rape, or trying to think of something else, like kind of crises, homelessness, things like that. This is a big one, and OSHA was heavily involved in the discussion when COVID happened, because our employers are required to provide us a safe environment to work in. And when COVID happened and there was the PPE shortage, it kind of came back to OSHA to say, if they aren't providing you with the required PPE, you're protected against not working for them. So OSHA tries to create standards that, create a safe workspace. Okay, let's stop there, and then we'll hit one more video of the rest of this.